Hey guys, this is DOD, aka Dark Frozen Depths, back with another Kamihime project video. This one is going to be another guide video, and just a quick little note, sorry it's been taking quite a long time for me to get back to the guide videos. I definitely need to redo some of them as well, because there's been some changes on the global side, and Japanese side has already got it a long time ago. But anyways, this is the Malicious Och raid, which you can also call Och Plus. It's not like the other Guardian Plus raids because she's got, at the time of this video, double the HP of the Guardian Plus raids, in fact. But it's also intended to be on the level of Malicious difficulty raids, so originally the Malicious raids had as much HP, actually more than her, but they got nerfed. So that's the thing with this. But this is also a Phantom Element raid too, so we can go into it and actually get the info about this fight. And just as a heads up too, I'm doing this off of Kami Labs, not the JP Wiki, because Kami Labs actually has more detailed info about this fight. But again, starting off, Phantom raid. This one has helpers just like the other Guardian Plus raid, so keep that in mind. And these helpers are actually quite dangerous. We'll get into more info about that. But as this is a Phantom raid, expect your team to always take weakness damage. There's very few characters in the game that can block Phantom damage directly without Phantom resistance, so if you have one of them, you may want to consider them for this fight. Otherwise, you'll probably need some damage cut, because again, things will get pretty dangerous. And on top of that too, the defense for this fight, the main body actually has 15 defense. That means that Och herself has more defense than normal, since the original defense value is 10 in this game. So if enemies have less than 10, they take more damage. If they have more than 10, they take less damage. Your defense debuffs will still affect this, it's just not as powerful as, say, putting defense down on an 8 defense enemy compared to a 15 defense. So, that said, if it feels like your damage is a little bit lower than normal, that's probably why. Also, they have attack power for the enemies, but if you want to be honest, I don't think it truly matters because of the damage calculations and everything in this game. But, who knows? But if you're curious, it says it's 25,000 for the helpers, and it's 70,000 for the main unit. Again, it is very, very dangerous when Och attacks too, because she can dish out quite a bit of damage. I have about as much HP as is shown on this little sample image. It can still go up pretty quickly. That's saying something. Now, total HP for the entire fight, it says 810 million, but when I did my soul of it, it had like an extra 21,000, so you could say it's about 810 million. But that's between all three enemies. If I'm to estimate things, the helpers would probably have anywhere between 1/3 to half that HP. But I'm not 100% sure on that one, so take that with a grain of salt. But if you're doing the entire fight, you're doing the whole 810 million anyway. The difference is that it's split between multiple enemies, so of course AoE is going to have pretty good effect here. Especially if it ignores defenses like damage plus, because that really helps out in this fight. There's some ways to get damage plus from buffing. A couple of Idoans give it, but you got to be very lucky with that one. You might have a weapon or two that does it as well, but your best source is most likely going to end up being the 100 MP skills from certain souls. But again, those won't last the whole fight, and they're not that reliable. You're better off with your Hime doing damage plus to bypass some defenses if need be. But speaking of defenses, as long as the helpers are around, Och will take reduced damage on top of the higher defense. It is 48% damage reduction per helper that's still around. So you definitely need to take those two out before you go after Och, or you're going to just extend the fight by a lot. This is where I said damage plus can come in handy a little bit too, because Och will still take full damage from the damage plus part of it. She just won't take full damage from the normal calculation. So say you normally do like 1 million damage from a normal attack, and then you get like 500,000 damage plus. That would mean that Och would take only about 200k normally, but the damage plus will still do its normal 500,000. So that's why I say damage plus can kind of help you out in this fight. It will speed things up a little bit. Now, the kicker with this fight is the fact that it's just like the previous Och battle, only on a much higher scale. That means each time she does her full orb attack, which is called bursts, but we also nickname it ODs or overdrives. Each time she does that, she gains one of these guardian factors on herself that you cannot remove. And it will cycle through all the different elements in the game. Starting with dark, then wind, then fire, then light, then water, then thunder, and after she's got all 6, she will do phantom. This is basically like a timer before you're about to get super nuked, as I'd like to call it. And even then, the individual nukes can actually be a bit of a problem if you're not prepared. So it's not just the phantom damage you have to worry about, you have to worry about everything else as well. So make sure you're well protected across the board. You need some buff removal maybe, depending on how long the fight takes. You definitely want debuff removal, because some of these can get annoying. And one of them can just flat out get rid of your team if you're not lucky. You definitely want to have some damage cut as well, because some of these can actually be pretty threatening before the phantom damage. It depends on how it all lands. So that said, a protection across the board, but going across each and every last one of these. The dark one, AoE damage to all your all people on your team. If you have a specific type of cover from some Hime, they can take the entire damage itself. One of the collab Hime was a white one from the Ayakashi collab that also collabed with Legend Clover at the same time. That 3-way collab, the white character from that is an example where she will just take all the damage to herself when she covers. However, if you have a different cover Hime, like say Gaia from Wind, then that won't block the AoE damage. Everybody will still get smacked. So there's specific covers that can reroute the damage like that. But good luck getting those characters, because there's not that many, and some of them are limited. One is flat out a collab character, so. But if you want that type of damage protection, that's a possibility. Otherwise, you probably will have dark resistance or damage cut for this if you need the dark resistance, but I don't think you do. But dark resistance will help you out, because it will help you lower the chances of getting hit with the debuff, which is the most dangerous debuff in this fight, if you ask me. And that is Ruin. On the global side, we call it Doom. But what it does, it will immediately take out your character once the timer runs out. Now, there is a few ways around it, but I think they may have been patched out. But the safest thing is to just get rid of the status or block it from landing anyways. So you can get ailment block from a few characters. You have one turn to actually get rid of it, because it says 2 turns, but one turn actually passes by the time the debuff lands, and the next turn actually triggers and everything. So you really have one turn. But you can get some elemental resistance to lower the chances of it landing. You can get a flat out debuff immunity. There's a few different ways for that. You have one turn to remove it flat out. There's a lot of healers in the game to do that as well, ironically. But make sure you get rid of this, because it can land on your entire team, and that is basically going to just ruin the fight for you. Pun not intended. So, again, most dangerous debuff. The wind one, again, AoE damage, does about the same damage as the dark one, but it gives a debuff. The global stat calls it putrefy, JP stat calls it corruption, but it's like a damage over time debuff, and it can actually rack up quite a bit of damage. It's going to ignore any sort of protection you have, except for barrier. So that said, you want to have this debuff removed if you can. If not, stay on top of your healing, because it can take upwards to 15,000. and it does tick on the same turn that it's landed. So you got 4 turns to remove it, but you are guaranteed to take that 3,000 by the time it lands. So remember that. Now for the fire one, this is where the damage starts increasing with each successive nuke that she does. This one will give confusion. It says to a single enemy, meaning one of your characters will be confused, guaranteed. What this does, it has a chance of making that character just not take any action and instead dealing damage to somebody on your team randomly. It only will be 1 turn, but it's guaranteed to land from what I've seen. So the only way to protect yourself against it is to have ailment protection that just flat out blocks it. Otherwise, you will have to remove it the same turn. But it's not as threatening as the other things. But if you're trying to do something like a full burst, good chances it's going to ruin that. So keep that in mind. Now the light one, this is where it gets a little bit dangerous. Each hit does about as much as a fire one, but the hits are random. If you have a cover character, like any cover character, they can absorb all the hits, but make sure they can survive this one, because it is 6 random hits. And if it all lands on the same character and you don't protect them that well, you might see them get wiped out. So keep that in mind. But the bigger takeaway from this one is also that it reduces your resistance towards phantom damage for 5 turns, essentially. And keep in mind that all the attacks that Och does that isn't these bursts are going to be phantom damage. So it's just helping that even further. And it can even compound with other stuff too if the helpers are still around. So it can get very, very dangerous very fast. You may want to get rid of this one. The water one. AoE damage, stronger AoE damage than the fire, dark, and wind nukes. But this one gives a permanent, like a permanent AoE to her normal attacks as long as it's active. This is called spread. Some characters have it. There's a soul that can give it to the entire team. And in fact, that's also another interesting way to try and deal with this fight, by making some of your normal attacks AoE. But she can do it as well. So you can remove this, but as long as it's in effect, all of her normal attacks are going to hit the entire team. So it can be dangerous, but you can also ignore it. It depends on how strong you are, really. The next one after water is actually one that could get in the way, and this is a thunder one. Deals about as much damage as the water one AoE, and it puts paralysis on your team. Paralysis is actually a very, very annoying skill, where it will just flat out prevent you from taking action on that turn. From what I know, it shouldn't prevent you from using abilities, but some cases they do. It depends on the fight. So either way, you do want to make sure you're protected against this one if you don't want it to land on you. If it does land on you, there's a chance it may not land on everyone. But if it lands on your healers, you're just a sitting duck for a turn. And worst case, you may end up in a situation where you can't heal and then one of your characters gets picked off. So there's that. But it will only last for basically 1 turn after the damage has been done. So it won't last that long. But the worst one is definitely that phantom damage one. The phantom damage one is going to be, they say a 20 times multiplier, but to put that in perspective, it is like 5 times stronger than the previous nuke, which was thunder. And the issue with this one is the fact that if you are not protected against this one, and she has no debuffs so the lower the damage she deals, it will one-shot your team. There is no question about it, because no one's going to have HP high enough to withstand it outright. It's like close to 200,000 AoE with no protection and no debuffs. So that said, this is a pretty dangerous nuke that you'll get hit with. Definitely have the protection for this one. This is where you may want to break out as much damage cut as you can get, as much phantom damage resistance as you can get, your barriers, your damage minus, all that type of stuff, because this is basically the this is basically the most dangerous part of the fight if she happens to get a turn to use this move, because you will get smacked very, very hard. So protect yourself with that one. And also, after she does this, she'll just cycle through the elements again. So she'll go back to the dark one. So if you got lucky, like say you didn't have any debuff removal for your team, and you got lucky and the doom didn't land on you the first time, after this, there's a chance it might come back. So keep that in mind. Now, moving on. The thing with the helpers, they don't seem to use normal attacks for most of the fight, unless you like do specific things like removing their orbs or some stuff like that. Now, the helpers are more there to just buff up Och herself, but they can do some crap to you as well, so be very, very careful with that. But the interesting thing is, the little elemental factors that the helpers can get, you can remove those, and that affects their AI a little bit. So keep that in mind. So if they happen to have like say the different ones like dark or wind or fire or any of the other ones, they will give specific buffs. I'm not going to go over when each one goes off, because they all just seem to like stack them very, very quickly. So you definitely want to take out the helpers as soon as possible. But Enna will end up giving triple attack to Och, also a defense up. If you can't remove this defense up, you can add extra defense down. So it's a defense up of 20%. Meaning if you have 70% defense down, this does not even do anything. And then she gives a vigor buff. This helper gives a vigor buff to Och. This is very dangerous because vigor is another damage multiplier, which is basically giving Och 50% more damage with how this fight's going to work. So yeah, if she's under the vigor buff and Och managed to make the Phantom Nuke, that 200k-ish nuke just went up to 300k. Assuming you have no protection and no debuffs on Och. So yeah, that's definitely a very dangerous part of this fight. That's the one time you might want some buff removal to get rid of that vigor buff, because again, it's another multiplier. And then there's also a phantom element that they can put on themselves too. Both of them, both helpers will they will end up getting a self damage up increase. But the thing is though, it's more for them getting mad and trying to attack you a little bit more often. So keep that in mind. I don't think they will buff Och as much as possible once one of them's down, but you still want to get both of them out. And then Zio happens to be the other helper, and this is where it will really grant a lot of damage buffing to Och for a few different things. One is going to be a Phantom Elemental attack buff of 20%. Combined with the Vigor, this will really, really spike the damage you take, so pretty dangerous for this one. A normal attack up buff, which again can multiply with Vigor and the Elemental one. Again, very, very dangerous. You don't want that. Especially if Och has a spread buff from the water thing, because then you're taking all that AoE, and you might even still have the element resistance from the light one before the water. So if all that's combined, expect those normal attacks to just shred your HP. But the third thing is also giving Och a barrier of 500,000 HP. Honestly, if a helper is still alive, you don't even need to worry about the barrier, because you're not trying to attack Och anyway. You're trying to get rid of those barriers first. And then like the other one, if one helper's done, the other one puts a permanent Phantom element on itself and just increases the damage it deals. So that's something to know. Now, when it comes to the burst and all that, it's all Phantom damage, but it also will regrant its factors to themselves. So if you remove the factor and then they get full orbs, expect them to put the factors back on themselves. So remember that. But this is basically general damage values when you take all the hits without any protection or debuffs or anything. So keep in mind that this is like more or less going to be the values you'll see getting hit throughout the fight if you just let everything go on its own. No debuffs on Och, no buffs on yourself. The normal attacks can deal like 5 digits of damage, and they can also be pretty threatening because remember, Och can combo. And at one point she can put spread on herself, so don't overlook the normal attacks. The burst from the first two factors can end up dishing out about 20k-ish, which is, you can withstand it outright if you have enough HP, but why take the chance? And then on top of that too, fire, it's a little bit more damage, AoE, and it'll be close to 25,000. Light is the one I'm easily saying is the second most damaging one, because again, if it hits one character, you can see why it will take them out, because it's dealing as much as fire, but the 6 hits can go up to somebody else, so that's close to 150,000 damage that somebody can take. At that point, you're just going to just expect them to be gone. Water and thunder will deal close to 30,000, and keep in mind that they have some annoying effects as well, so again, pay attention. And like I said, the Phantom one, if there's no mitigation on either side, it's going to basically one-shot you. 200,000 HP is extraordinarily hard to get in this game. It is possible, but I don't think it's possible in a raid. I think it's only possible in the Union event, so expect it to one-shot you if you don't have any protection. Don't get caught off guard by that. And then the helpers, they're dealing like close to half the damage that Och would deal for a lot of the stuff. The only exception is if they have the Phantom element on themselves, then their nukes will actually be a little bit threatening, because they'll be dealing about as much as the Dark and the Wind one, AoE. So pay attention to that. Now, I'm not going to go over recommended Hime because of the fact that there's a wide range of them and they updated it since then. But if I'm going to say any things to pay attention for, Phantom Resistance can help you out. Definitely Damage Cut. I can't see anybody running this fight without Damage Cut unless they are just intending for others to clear the raid. It is still a raid. You definitely need a healer, especially one that can remove debuffs off yourself. If you can remove buffs off the enemy as well, that helps as well. There's a few Hime in the game to do that. You may want to buy yourself some more time by removing orbs, because the thing is, you can't increase the max orbs in this fight, but you can still remove them. So, keep that in mind. But the biggest takeaway, do not expect any character that can land a debuff that will delay a turn. Like the Dizzies, the Paralyze, the Flame Binds, all of that does not work. You can land them, but they will never take effect. So, remember that. But you can land something specific, and that's why they recommend Perseus. But I'm going over the souls for that one. So again, bring the normal stuff basically when you go into any hard fight, like the protections, the debuff removals, all that. But as for recommended souls, Asclepius can heal you and the entire raid. So if you really have no idea what to do, grab Asclepius, can heal you and the entire raid. If you got a specific weapon, her heal also removes a debuff from everybody in the raid. And then she's also able to share an ability that does that as well. So it doesn't heal people, but it will remove debuffs, so that comes in handy. She's got some defensive buffs, which can surprisingly help, because remember, defensive buffs stack with the damage cuts and everything else. She can remove buffs if you set her up that way. Biggest takeaway is the fact that she can revive characters through multiple methods, and she can also give you potions. Normal potions can be generated by specific characters. That can actually come in handy if you need an emergency heal. Now, the counter to Asclepius, and I don't know why they didn't mention this, Romulus, because she can provide damage cut for the entire raid, and also guard from some things and even remove orbs. So that's something I can suggest. Perseus can put a specific type of blind on enemies that will stack with the normal blind. It is called Shade. If both of those landed, I don't think Och is going to land any normal attacks, period, point blank. Or the helpers if they happen to do it too. So, that said, that can be very helpful for this fight. Then on top of that, she does a lot, and I mean a lot of debuffs. She can remove orbs from enemies. Very good soul to have if you want to go the debuffing route. Jack of all trades is basically Caspar. She can play a whole bunch of different roles, but it all depends on what you truly want. So Caspar is like a basically build your soul however you want. I can also say the same thing to a lesser extent about Kong Ming, who they're suggesting, because Kong Ming's kind of like a jack of all trades as well, but also gives you some protection over time as the fight progresses, so keep that in mind. If you're going the offensive route, I would say if you really know what you're doing with damage multipliers, Hector can really speed up your damage and take out those helpers pretty quickly. Excuse me. Also, you can bring in Paracelsus or Yorimitsu. Depends on if you're going normal attack or burst setup. Those two can also help out as well, so keep that in mind. And like I said, Paracelsus is a normal attack soul. She can put spread on your entire team. That can actually speed up the damage dealing to those helpers and give a little bit towards Och as well. Especially if you brought her 100 MP skill. So that said, that's also helpful. You can use Medea to help with some AoE damage as well and get your cooldowns back. Just don't bring her her damage plus skill because it's not that great. But instead bring Hour of the Overlord so Medea can get faster cycles on her abilities. So this is the one time she can actually help, especially since that AoE damage is very helpful with taking out those helpers. And she can deal quite a surprising amount of it. So there's that. And speeding up your cooldowns when everybody else does more than you would think. So I can even recommend her for this fight too. But basically anybody else is like specific setups or kind of niche or whatever. Like if you have like Rebellion, of course bring Benkei because Benkei got that AoE cover, and then as long as you have at least 5 characters alive, meaning you've only lost no more than 2 characters, Benkei will not go down at all. So keep that in mind. But I used Edison for my solo fight because Edison's stacking buffs on top of like giving some healing and then AoE damage, all that from her bots, which is the first 2 abilities. Then on top of that too, she's also giving some cooldown speed up as well on other characters, as well as herself if she bursts. But you gotta burst with her weapon in order to get the cooldown speed up for her. So another one that can also deal a surprising amount, especially if you don't mind all the clicking. She's probably one of the highest damage in a turn souls that you can do. So there's that. But it's only for like maybe 1 turn if you just unload everything at the start. You need a specific setup to constantly like let her unload. And also there's another jack of all trades I'd say is Alexander and Parashurama. Those 2 are kind of jack of all trades like Caspar, but they're more offensive. So there's that. And the last one I could recommend is honestly Alhazred for the variety of effects she actually has, along with the summon damage being buffed up in this game. If you have her weapon, it's buffed even further. She can speed up summon cooldowns. Summons have a lot of different variety of effects that can help you out, like buffs, debuffs, and all that type of stuff. If you know what you're doing, Alhazred is actually pretty solid, so another one I can recommend. But like I said, for characters, you can kind of just see who's here for some specific recommendations. But again, we got other characters that are here now. Like for example, I wouldn't take Dion, the fire version, if you have the fire version of Foibe. So that's an obvious thing. And they got some limited ones too. It's more just remember what each character does, and then you can go from there. But they have a wide range of them for like literally all the elements. Pause it if you're curious about who's who. Some of these are collab characters though, so keep that in mind. Like for example, Izuna, who they even mention here, very, very good healing character for Win, but she was a collab character that only appeared twice. She's not showing up anymore. So either you have her or you don't. And then also something too for because I got reminded of it when I seen Nefertum right here for Thunder. If you have a character that does a specific debuff called Wound, it is also another damage multiplier increase, paired very, very well with specific souls, especially Hector. It can really help you out. So it can really spike the damage you deal if you know what you're doing. And then special mission has to go to the SSR version of Naruto Tap that they're showing right here. She debuffs every element, including Phantom. So she's helping the entire freaking raid if you bring her. So anybody that's using dark characters should definitely bring her if they have her. Like, I have to get special mention to her because she's debuffing everything. Everything. And then also she might land some stuff too that can help you out as well. But all of this is just other sad stuff that they're showing, like the different companion factors and all that. But keep this one thing in mind as they're reminding you right here. You can't remove the elemental factors off Och, only the helpers. And you can't remove the Phantom one off the helpers either. They only put the Phantom one if one of them's alive. So keep that in mind. And again, pay very close attention to the vigor buffs, the changes in Phantom damage from Och, like the Phantom buff on her or the Phantom debuffs on you. Pay close attention to the normal attack boost if it happens with all that other stuff, because then you're just going to take a crap ton of damage. Do not let that Doom go off, or it's going to very, very easily mess you up. You may or may not want to get rid of that Putrefy as well. Just make sure your HP is pretty high. There is no triggers on this other than the helpers. And the only trigger they do is to zip and put the Phantom effects on themselves and just not use the elemental ones. So, that said, that's literally the only trigger in this fight. It's basically you versus Och and whoever else wants to join the raid. So, there's not too many gimmicks outside of the factor thing. Because that's the only thing that's going to affect the AI. But anyways, that's all for this. More videos will come soon on different guides and all that, because I still got to go through all the Malicious raids. Malicious Plus too, once I dig up the info for those, because I haven't found a place to get the info for the Malicious Plus. But time will tell on that one. I might even figure out how the fights work myself. But then on top of that too, I've already done a solo clear video of this. However, my grade is higher than normal for the people that may be using a light team, so keep that in mind. But it is an interesting way to set up your characters and all that throughout the fight in order to try and deal quite a lot of damage. But if you have a grid that is like full of 5-star weapons, as in the ones that can get Final Break 2, or as we nicknamed them, Ultimate Limit Break, you have a very good chance of actually dealing quite a lot of damage in this fight, or even possibly soloing it. So keep that in mind. But you do need to do this fight in order to unlock what would be the S2 souls later down the line. That would be Benkei, Edison, Alhazred, Kongming, and Alexander. You need to do this fight to unlock those souls. You can't get them otherwise. At least for now. But anyways, that's all for this. Again, more will come soon. Expect more guide videos down the line. There is a guide playlist as well that I will have somewhere in the comments or the video description. But that's all for now, guys. More will come soon, and take care.